Hey everyone, I'm Brad with Unwired View. Today we're checking out the Motorola CLIQ 2, or the Motorola CLIQ Dos, or Dos, or Do, however you want to say it. It is the second CLIQ. No, it's not. It's actually the third, because there's the Motorola CLIQ, there's the CLIQ XT, and there's the CLIQ 2. That makes 3, my friends. However, they decided to call it 2 because you can't just jump from XT to 3. That would just be dumb, right? Yeah. So, looking at the CLIQ lineup, we have noticed that it's more of a mid-range kind of handset. It's not necessarily the top of the line for Android, but it's always right there in the middle. It's a good budget device, not really too expensive, but not too cheap either. And that's a great place to be, especially nowadays, because mid-range, really you're looking at gigahertz processor, half a gig of RAM, and plenty of storage space on the side. Little things like that. 5 megapixel camera. I mean, that's average nowadays, and that's just crazy to think. So, here we have the CLIQ 2 in the flesh, or the plastic, really, if you want to be all technical about it. Now, most people are calling it the CLIQ 2, but it could also be known as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle phone. We're going to look more into that keyboard in a second, but trust me, it's like a turtle. So, let's get more into it. The CLIQ 2 review from Motorola. I'm Brad with UnwiredView.com. Let's get straight to it. Presenting the Motorola CLIQ 2. Now, as the other CLIQ phones in the lineup, these phones are meant to be more of a mid-range Android handset. They're not going to be the top of the line, but they're not dirt cheap budget phones either. And you can definitely tell by its overall design that they definitely put a lot of thought into it, but it's not necessarily the big one that they're trying to push. And certainly I can't help but feel sorry a little bit for the timing of the CLIQ 2, because frankly, even amongst Motorola's lineup at the CES show in Las Vegas back in January, the CLIQ 2 is being launched alongside the Atrix 4G and the Droid Bionic, and also by the Motorola Zoom. So you had all these huge, top-of-the-line, headline-making Android devices coming out, and the CLIQ 2 was like, hey, I'm here, guys. You want to check me out? Hey, guys? So, I couldn't help but feel a little bit sorry for the CLIQ 2, and it's definitely a good quality phone here. So it shouldn't be left and just tossed away by the wayside just simply because it's not as cool as the other phones. So it can play with the big boys, more or less anyways. So looking at this thing here, let's go over a little bit of just the hardware itself. For design and hardware, we have a 3.7-inch touchscreen capacitive, and this one uses a TFT display, which is actually quite bright, as you can see. Very easy to read, very nice on the eyes, certainly, especially when you compare it to the original CLIQ and the XT for that matter. The resolution on both of those screens were not as good as this one here. So we've got that going. Of course, as you can tell just by the layout here, we've got some typical boxes and social networking stuff thrown in there, Twitter, Facebook, and that is a key indicator that this phone has Moto Blur. So, love it or hate it, it's really up to you, just depending on your own personal experience with it. I'm rather indifferent with Moto Blur myself. It's better now with some of the key improvements that they've made in these kind of phones, such as the Droid Pro, the Droid 2 Global, and of course now the CLIQ 2. They have a lot more security updates and a lot more enhancements in the actual social networking widgets themselves. So it's a lot more bearable to me than it was when it first came out and it was under Android 1.5. On the backside, we have some ridges here. It gives it an extra gripability. I don't know if that's a real word, but I don't care because I like it. And overall, you can tell that this thing has a bit of heft to it. It's not going to be the skinniest or the lightest phone on the planet because really it's above average in terms of weight and size. we're looking here at over 6 ounces, which is definitely more than the standard average phone. Now, taking a look at this keyboard, having the full QWERTY and certainly an interesting shape. This is where I was getting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle reference from before. It's got some of these hexagonal buttons here that help give it good spacing and certainly enough clearance from the rest of the board itself. So in that sense, it's easy enough to press. The thing that I didn't like about the keyboard itself was just the fact that it's pretty darn stiff. So it's hard to tell from the actual pictures or video. It's something that you have to try out yourself. But like in playing around with it, it was easy enough to press the buttons, yes. However, it was a little bit longer, a little bit slower for me to type on, just because it had a little bit more of a stiff feeling to it. And sometimes I felt like it was just a little too pointy, if that makes any sense. The things that I do like about it is it's got some dedicated buttons here. It's got the @ button, the search, a period button, and granted I would like a little bit more than that, but it's not bad overall for the experience. For example, I would love to have a .com button. I always love a .com button, and frankly, I think every phone, every smartphone that is, should have it because of how much emailing and web surfing you're going to be doing with this thing. The processor inside the CLIQ2 is a gigahertz processor made by Texas Instruments, or TI for short. The processor used is the same as you would find on the Droid Pro and the original Droid 2, and behave very well in terms of the speed. Now, looking at this, everything goes pretty fast. You don't really have too much of an issue with processing power. Everything just loads up pretty darn fast. So that's what I appreciate, is having this gigahertz processor makes up for the fact that it's got the motor blur, slowing it down a little bit. So I really don't see too many things causing it to be slow, though, as you can tell. So just looking at some of the different things going on at MWC on my calendar here, but this is a good indicator of just overall processing power. So also, in addition to having that gigahertz processor, it does come with 512 megabytes of RAM. And RAM is, in my opinion, equally as important to the performance of the phone as the processing speed itself. Speed, well, really doesn't make up the entirety of the phone and its performance, frankly. I've seen a lot of phones that have slower clock speeds but are actually faster in performance just because of there's, well, several different factors, and RAM, of course, is one of them. So I definitely like to keep that in mind. One final word about some of the hardware that's included on the CLIQ2. One thing I really like about this is that it has its own little silent button, or a silent toggle switch, rather, which, much like the iPhone, just helps put it in vibrate mode very quickly, instead of me having to worry about just repeatedly pressing the down volume button or going into a widget to put it in vibrate that way. You know, there's several different ways that you can typically do it on an Android, but it's nice to just have that dedicated button, so that way I don't have to worry about it. One other thing that confuses me about the CLIQ2 is that it was announced at the same event where T-Mobile is announcing 42 megabits per second speeds coming out later this year, and many markets currently have up to as much as 14 and 21 megabits per second through T-Mobile's 4G service. The CLIQ2 is 3G only. So it's kind of interesting to me to see the CLIQ2 not include the 4G on this one, especially as a brand new phone coming out alongside all these other 4G phones. It would have likely been a very good marketing move, in my opinion. Doesn't mean it's a terrible phone. It doesn't mean that it even performs that slowly when it comes to internet, but it certainly could be much faster if it had access to that 4G network. A couple final thoughts on the CLIQ2 and some recapping. One thing I noticed very nice about the CLIQ 2 is the battery life on this one. It actually comes with the same exact battery as the original CLIQ, but yet it cranks out at least a 2-hour improvement in overall talk time. Now this is continuous talk time we're talking about here, and it's 7.9 hours to be specific. Might as well round up to say 8, frankly. And the average that you would see, especially like on the original CLIQ, for example, normally with Android in the past we've seen battery lives of 5 to 6 hours be the norm, and it just seemed as though if you're doing other stuff that's graphics heavy or using the internet a lot, other applications, well, it ends up going a lot faster than what it's rated for. With this one, we haven't had enough time to concentrate on the exact battery life, but with it being rated at 7.9, we are much more hopeful on it lasting actually that long, if not at least longer than most of the standard Androids in the past. Certainly with all the updates coming out, the Froyo, the Gingerbread, and all this, we are noticing some hefty improvements in the way the battery life is being managed. So, for example, you will see a battery manager in here. The CLIQ 2 keyboard was an excellent way for Motorola to think outside the box. I really enjoyed the design on this one, even though it does look like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or a beehive or something like that. It's kind of a crazy design, but overall pretty nice. The thing about it, you've got these great little hexagonal keys here. They're all spaced out very well because of that hexagonal shape. But it's also very, very stiff. So when I start typing something, I have a hard time typing very fast compared to some of the other ones like the Evo Shift 4G, for example. That was a keyboard that I could type very fast on. With this one, it's all right, but it did get frustrating in some instances. So keep that in mind if you're looking into it. You definitely want to try out the keyboard before you buy it. So those are certainly a good overview of my thoughts and feelings and emotions about the CLIQ 2. And that, my friends, will just about do it for us here for this review of the CLIQ 2. Now, it's been a fun time. This phone is actually a very good performing phone, and it's not very expensive either. So it's a phone that I definitely recommend. The only thing that you'll want to check out, in my opinion, first before you buy it, is the keyboard itself. Just make sure that it's going to fit your needs and that it's comfortable enough for you to use on a regular basis. So I hope you enjoyed the review. Certainly check out our full review with lots more words involved over at unwiredview.com. And I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.